You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. And yes, I am your host, Rick Franzi, and I think we're going to have a great show for you today. Why, do you ask? Because Eric Gildenguys is our guest. He's a returning guest. It's been 10 years, but we have him back here on the show. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and who you help and what you do and some lessons learned. So let's get right into it and take us back in time to when you decided to start Rezultant as a coaching consulting business. What was the motivation and the inspiration for that decision?
I've been an entrepreneur, I guess, since I was a young kid. My first job was my family needed money at the age of 11. I decided, let's go get some money. And I played the accordion at a restaurant. And since then, worked at a computer store, university, and helped start up a distribution company in the hardware software side of the business in the 80s in Canada. Co-founded a software company. So I've always had an interest in startups. I got the juice from that. Starting Rezultant was after having sold the company we had co-founded with a friend of mine, Daryl Hatton, up in Canada, to a U.S. company. I became the intrapreneur, and they wanted me to move back to Atlanta to the headquarters. And I was going, Atlanta, Newport Beach. So I started my own consulting firm, and then I was focusing with Rezultant. I was helping companies with their sales process, sales methodology, helping them grow their business to the next level.
So I still can't get past an 11-year-old playing accordion. Do you still play?
No, I haven't played that, but I did play, for the whole summer. That was great. I was competitive for a while, but put up the accordion and got into computer programming and, wrote a general ledger program at the age of 15 and, did a bunch of other stuff.
It's a beautiful instrument, the accordion. Much maligned, but beautiful. I'm Italian, and that was my family favorite instrument. I'm Italian. When we'd get together in the summer, I remember being under the grape arbor at my grandparents', and people would take turns playing their accordion and sing songs. So look at you.
Yeah, it was an Italian restaurant. So there you go.
There you go. We Italians. I love it. All right. So let's talk about, when you started out, it's been 20 plus years. Have you had pivots to the business model to change it, to stay current? What's changed in the business model over that time?
I had a vertical niche at the beginning. I was, it was around sales process, sales methodology, and helping companies with their sales team. I had one major client, which was a PwC, and I was traveling all over the world, working with their partners and directors. And then I worked with startups here in Orange County. That's migrated to more of helping startups get, validating their business models. I'm getting involved a lot more earlier in the company's process. I seem to have attracted a lot of companies who've got this idea or this concept, and they're going like, I don't know if this makes business sense, or they've sold one or two deals, but they don't know how to sell 20 or 30 or 100 units. And so I come in and that's, I would say, is one of the pivot points over the last 10 years, has been much more involved with those types of companies compared to just purely sales and marketing.
So when you're brought into an early stage startup like that, are there any common things that you find that you can help them with, or mistakes that they're making?
I think the most founders or people who come up with a concept are technical oriented, and I'm not talking about technology. They're technically oriented about what that features and functions of the product are. And that's what they're focusing on, is the features and functions. Whereas I come in and I'm looking to making sure they understand what are the business issues, what's the issues, and asking questions to the point where we can quantify the pain. Because businesses who are going to be buying those services or products, they've got to get a return on their investment. So how do we change it from a feature function into having those effective conversations? I tend to focus a lot more in the B2B world. So that is something that's really important. So that is, I think, the key thing is, I got this great idea, I got this great widget, I've got something, and they just want to sell the widget and they haven't either been formally trained or have learned that you've got to be talking about the business issues that widget will solve, whether it's a service or a product.
Are there any certain industries are more prevalent that you've helped over the past 10 years? Or
in the last 10 years, I would say, oddly enough, in the last 7 years, one of my clients was in the clinical trial space. And so they were a client of mine. They only had 10 employees. I came into, it was an AI platform. 9 years ago, AI was just, there. Now it's common nature. And they had a product, and I was a consultant to help set up that business model, that sales process, sales model. And it got to the point where, wait a minute, they like me, I like them. I jumped on board temporarily to help them as a full-time employee. And then I became really well-versed in the clinical trial space. So that space I know very well because of the last 7 years. But I've got a company that's nothing to do with that. They're in the advertising space. They've got a specific niche. So, and I've done construction business, but I would say the last 7 years it's been AI in the clinical trial space.
You don't really, at least I didn't think of sales in the clinical trials space. That I guess every business has to sell their product or service. So,
well, if you can imagine a life science company, whether it's a Pfizer or Novartis or anything like, or Allergan here locally, they've got a potential treatment. They have to go through a clinical trial process. Well, they've got to pay somebody to do it, and we keep thinking that it's typically hospitals that do it. But there are, like example here in the United States, there are over 10,000 separate institutions, doctor practices, freestanding units that run clinical trials on behalf of those large companies, because you have to have an independent organization that can tell you whether the results from that clinical trials are good. Well, if those companies are running the clinical trials, what software are they using to track that? What equipment are they using? So you're selling products and services to them because they need that equipment to make it more productive. So it's a little small ecosystem. It's a vertical niche. And so there's always, it's like anything else.
It's nice to have a niche.
Yes, very true, especially in the business, in the B2B world. Having a niche and understanding that niche and understanding it, like, what are the issues going on? And I think what's interesting is most people when they go in there, they're trying to, again, figure out what problem they're solving relative to the people who are using the product. But sometimes the decision maker is the CEO, and they don't care about who's using the product, but how do you have a conversation sequence that makes it relevant to the CEO of that company, which is more about financials or efficiencies compared to the person who's going to be using your product, widget, services, or whatever. So again, part of what I've brought on and what I think is important in the startup world is to be able to effectively communicate to the different personas or the different individuals. And that is a big challenge, because somebody who's a technical person, who's, let's call it a nerd, how comfortable are they going to be able to speak to a C-suite? If they can't, how do you train them? Are they trainable? Do you bring in somebody else? Are they comfortable bringing in somebody else who is comfortable talking to the C-suite of a mid-size or a large company? And so it's really important that you can talk effectively to what the various individuals of the company care about.
It almost sounds like while you're doing sales, you're also doing a lot of marketing or helping them in the marketing area too, aren't
Absolutely.
you?
Yeah. I'm not, I would say I am not the creative marketing agency kind of individual, but what I do provide as a consulting firm and what I inspire within a team is to coming up with what is the content that can help the marketing organization communicate effectively. How, I can craft the wording, but getting the graphics, leveraging the various vehicles to get to those people to generate the leads. Because what's really important, depending on the industry, sometimes it's more important to create a brand. Sometimes it's more important to attend conferences and network as a marketing tool compared to just advertising on Facebook or on LinkedIn or things of that nature. In the clinical trial space, because if you can imagine in the clinical trial space, you're there as an organization trying a treatment on that can help the world with patients who are either need the treatment or are willing to try it. Well, guess what? Their mentality is, prove me that your solution works, prove that your technology works, because that's what I do in my day-to-day world. So maybe it's case studies are more important than advertising. So everybody's different, but going back to what you're saying, it's important that we identify what are the business issues relevant to the different individuals within the organizations or the personas.
Excellent. So let's shift our focus a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe you could share with our audience a piece of business advice that you found particularly valuable. If you could pay that forward.
Yeah, sure. Not a problem. I would say that one of the biggest business advice I have is ask open-ended questions, listen, and keep asking the questions until you understand what's the real pain. Because if you keep asking the questions and the open-ended questions, the client's going to realize, one, you care about them, and two, you understand their business. I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice is to listen and keep asking until both parties realize, that's the pain. Because it's like peeling the onion. The analogy I use is keep peeling the onion to the point where they're almost ready to cry. They won't cry, but it's getting to that point where they go, because you can say, okay, sales are low. Okay, so why are sales low? They answer with this answer. Keep asking, and then you can drill it down. I think that's one of the biggest value. I'll always remember I was in London, and at the beginning, somebody would ask a question, I would go in with the answer, go in with the kill. Just keep asking, drill down, open-ended questions. And I think the other advice, bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush.
What do you mean by that?
Pardon?
What do you mean by that?
I think that especially in the startup world, whether you have a potential investor, whether you have a potential buyer, whether you have a potential prospect, sometimes it's better to take what you've got. If you're clear on your intent, then the possibility down the future. I've seen a lot of companies say no and continue on. And I think they said no because they weren't clear themselves of what they wanted to do with the company. They weren't willing to admit to where they were or what was going on. And so I kind of say, if you've got a deal, it's better to take it, but you've got to make sure you're clear on what your intent is.
Yeah, people have a fear of missing out. Oh, if I take this deal, what's right around the corner? And yeah, good advice.
Yeah.
So AI has been everywhere. You've been dealing with it for a long time, but it's been in the zeitgeist of people's thinking since OpenAI and ChatGPT. But it's been around, as you can attest, longer than that. I'm wondering, what's your view on artificial intelligence, especially as it relates to your industry and to your niches? And maybe you give us your perspective on AI.
There is one thing that I think is important that everybody has to recognize, whether consciously or subconsciously, which is you can use AI for the good, but you can also use it for the bad. And so behind that is having a clear understanding on what is your intent in using AI as a product or a service offering. In regards to impacting my firm, being more productive, finding information much quicker and better, identifying ways a company can improve their processes, improve better customer experience or customer success, better leveraging it to qualifying leads in a chatbot environment, things of that nature, offering additional products and services. There's going to be a lot of, it's going to be huge. But again, if we think about products, and offerings and services, what is your current services? What are your current products? Or, how does it impact the power of the individuals? Are you taking power away from the individuals? Are you impacting the individuals in the way that they work? If it's positive, great. But if it's negative, then you've got to look at that impact, because there's a fine line between, when we think of running a business, we've got to make sure we get a return for the investors, whether you're publicly traded or private, okay, whether it's dividends. Okay, we focus on quarterly earnings, unfortunately, but that's one. But we've also got to make sure the clients are happy. We also have to make sure that the employees are happy. So if I'm using AI, how do I make sure all three are happy, not just one? Okay, and that, I think, is one things we have to be very conscious of, is that we, if we're looking to use AI, you got to look at all three at best, not just one. And I think that is something important, but that I look at. But what's interesting is, I'm a mentor for budding entrepreneurs at Chapman University, and these are young students, and they're leveraging AI immediately. But I can tell you right now, they're thinking about how it can solve problems, but they're not thinking about the whole impact, because they're 20 years old, they're 22 years old, and they're leveraging open AI and things like that left, right, and center. So there's some good parts, which I think are fantastic. You just have to be careful, or be aware, I think is a better term. Yes,
be aware. Like anything in life, right? There's unintended consequences you have to consider. Earlier you'd mentioned about an instance in your career where you got along so well with your client, they wanted more of you, so you agreed to be a full-time employee for a period of time. As a consultant, can you talk about that role where you go from, helping them as an external resource to then becoming an employee, and then kind of getting back out of that relationship? Can you talk a little bit about your experience in that area?
Yeah. So I have a choice. I'm running my own consulting practice. So with that, I'm not eager to grow the organization. I enjoy. So I can decide my work hours. I have the flexibility. It's a feast or famine circumstance sometimes. Depends if you've got bills to pay and things of that nature. That's great. If you work for a company, you typically have a regular paying job. But if you're in the entrepreneurial world, you don't know if that's going to continue on or not. One of the things that I think is great about joining a company is you can take it from a certain state. And typically I would be brought in where I have to be involved and get my hands dirty. What I mean by that is I'm sometimes the guy who has to prove the sales model. So I'm the salesperson. Then when I've done that, I can, bring in the salespeople, put in the sales processes, get that up and running to the point where I'm getting bored. It's like it's running smoothly. Then bring in other people. Then I go off and do something else. So that's the fun part about that. Compared to consulting, it depends what kind of clients you get, what type. You get a lot of variety. That's the pro. You get a lot of variety. You get different kinds of clients, and I find you learn a lot, because if I'm brought into, for example, a construction client, an advertising client, a startup in the clinical trial space, a startup in the pharmaceutical business, I have to learn, and I love that part of the consulting world. Whereas if you go in as an employee, you're becoming really good in a domain expertise in that space.
Right.
There's pros and cons. It's what, do you love variety? But I've been really lucky. There are people who have a goal Um, I'm going to use the example of Bill Gates and Elon Musk. They have a goal. They're going to it. They're going to do whatever it takes to get there. Okay. And I admire those people, and they're fantastic. I'm the kind of person who just goes where the circumstances go as a consultant. And when I find a client, I have a specific goal. It's not maybe a 20-year goal, but I have a vision, and I'm on board with the founders to say, here's what we're going to do for the next 2 years to get you in 10 years. Because there's a skill set that you need in the first 2 to 5 years of a company, which is a different skill set than somebody, you need a different organizational skills, leadership skills when you're running $100 million company than a $5 million company. $5 million company, everybody's got their hands involved in doing everything. Mm-hmm. My skill set, if I was to say, and what I've been very good in helping other companies is in that under 100 employees, 1 or 2 levels of management. That's my skill. I don't get hired by 1,000 employee, 10,000 employee companies. So, it's a different skill set, a different type of involvement, a different type of getting your hands dirty, things of that nature.
So I'm going to have you back on the show. It probably won't be, I probably won't wait 10 years to have you back, but where are you taking your career? Where are you taking Rezultant? What is going to be different? What's your vision for the future?
What's my bit? Look, inspiring excellence by leading, coaching, facilitating startups and small companies that want to get to the next stage. I think if anything, it's going to be maybe not as many getting involved full-time, or maybe part-time chief revenue officers, part-time CEOs, depending on what's going on. I think today what we considered, what we did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as a full-time person, sometimes you just need a part-time person. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to say just leading, coaching, facilitating startups and small companies who need to get to the next level of growth. That's what I'm going to continue doing.
What an exciting space to be in, the early stage companies. Boy, there's a lot of energy in that, and that keeps you on your toes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Exactly. You've got that correct. And and then working with as we both said, we saw each other. I've got a bit more gray hair now. I really enjoy meeting up with the a younger generation and figuring out what they care about. And because they're just as smart as both you and I. All we have is experience of doing things the wrong way and the right way. And we can help them by just,
I think of that as wisdom.
Yeah.
Experience wisdom born of experience, which, is valuable, especially to a lot of different types of clients. So if someone wants to connect with you on LinkedIn, Eric, or learn more about your firm, how do they find you online?
LinkedIn, it's, Eric Gildenguys, like you see on the streaming here. One word is my LinkedIn. Rezultant, I have a website, rezultant.com. You can go in there and request to be contacted. I think LinkedIn is the best approach because one, we can continually get messaging. So grab my name. It's not easy, but it's the only one there. And we can talk and see if and how we can help.
Well, it's been nice to have you back on the show, and I wish you more years of continued success as you continue to help companies get out of that early stage startup mentality into a scalable business. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Rick. And thank you for doing this for as long as you have. So thank you.
You're welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've just been a part of Orange County's longest running business talk show. Eric's episode joins our catalog of close to 1,500 episodes that we've done over the years that we've been on the air. If you're an Orange County entrepreneur like Eric, or you're a executive director of a nonprofit and you would like to tell your story to our audience, then connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Coincidentally, that's our company's website as well, rickfranzi.com. And between Haley, our producer, and myself, we can help to get you scheduled and prepared to be a future guest on the show. And until the next time we have a chance to be together, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.